Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Full Out Cheer podcast. I'm Danielle, and I'm your host for today. So last week, we went over an open letter to cheer gym owners that was posted on the Crazy Moms of Cheer page. If you didn't listen to that episode, definitely make sure you go back a week, download the episode, and listen. But I am going to get started pretty quickly here on part 2 of this episode so that we can dive right in and learn what the Crazy Moms of Cheer thinks that owners should be doing. Here we go. Number 3, replacing loyal athletes. Bringing in replacements late in the summer after athletes have trained all summer is demoralizing. It sends the message that no matter how hard they work or how loyal they've been, they're always one step away from being replaced. This mindset doesn't motivate, it breaks spirits. Instead of searching for the next best thing, focus on developing and uplifting the athletes who have already invested in your program. Loyalty should be valued and not overlooked. Okay. So I agree and don't agree on this. Loyalty should be valued and not overlooked. Yes, I agree that loyalty should be valued. We're going to talk about number 5, favoritism and fairness, and I'm going to speak to the loyalty situation there. However, replacing loyal athletes, when we talk about how it's demoralizing, we have to remember again that this is a competitive sport. In most other sports, an athlete could be replaced, like in football. I'm going to go to a football game tonight, and if the running back isn't doing a good job, they're going to replace him. They're going to pull him out of the game and put somebody else in, right? My daughter was on the soccer team last year for her high school, and if she wasn't doing well controlling the ball, she would get swapped with somebody else. Like if you're in volleyball and you're not hitting it, you're not serving effectively for your team to score, you're going to get replaced. That said, one of the greatest benefits for people of All-Star Cheer is that it is hard to replace people. I don't think we should be replacing, and this is in favor of the parents here, I don't think we should be replacing anybody without those conversations. But there are different types of gyms, and you are going to see that. And please don't mistake my words for saying D1 and D2, because that's not the case. All of these conversations in here so far have nothing to do with D1 and D2, though I saw them in the 95 comments in the first hour. I saw lots of those. But they really have nothing to do with D1 and D2. Do D2 gyms sometimes have a harder time replacing athletes, and so we work a little more with them to get the skills before we consider any sort of replacement or change in the routine? Yes, and I think that's a benefit of a D2 gym. That said, I know plenty of D2 gyms that would replace an athlete if an athlete were not doing what they said they were going to do or what they did at tryouts. So this kind of goes back to the other one. It doesn't matter what the loyalty is. If a kid was really close to their handspring, and so we put them on a level 2 team, and then all of a sudden they stopped throwing the handspring. Like, do I have to replace them in a tumbling section? Absolutely. Like, do I have to replace them with an athlete that can throw that pass? Absolutely. Because you still have a score sheet to hit. I think not overlooking your new athletes and not, to say in general that we should be rewarding loyalty is in itself favoritism. I'm demonstrating favoritism to those who've been part of the program for years over those who are new to the program. And so I think it's really hard because we can't really talk about replacing loyal athletes versus replacing new athletes. I think that's where this section of the post kind of went wrong for me. If this were just saying replacing athletes who've been put in a position in a sudden way or whatever, like you would have had me a little bit more on your side here. But by saying replacing loyal athletes, I had a really hard time with that one because I'm like, well, I appreciate that this kid has been here this long and I do value that. That said, it is favoritism if I'm treating 2 athletes with very different skill levels very differently. Now, let me tell you the reality in my program. I encountered this situation a little bit this year when we do our Flyers tryouts for the year. And I had heard that we may have an athlete or 2 that were interested in coming back to cheer, and they had left for a few years. And I honestly kind of think it was probably hearsay that they were interested in coming back because they're like seniors in high school. But nevertheless, they had been Flyers in the past, and they're incredibly skilled Flyers. That said, I had already kind of made the decision after that initial Flyer tryout on which 3 Flyers I was going to put, 3 plus an alternate, on that senior team. We had been building these younger kids for that opportunity. And so to have two kids who were seniors come back and say, okay, you've been gone. You went to, one of you went to another gym. The other one's just taken off for another sport, to come back and take one of those flying spots when I've kind of already made a decision, even though tryouts haven't been released. Like, did I have the right to do it as a gym owner? Absolutely. Was there anything negative that somebody could have said if those girls had also come into Flyers tryouts and shown everybody that they deserved the spot? Nothing I could have said, really. But for me, it didn't feel right. The two that were thinking about coming back didn't come to Flyers tryouts. They weren't signed up for tryouts. So I didn't get to experience that and have to make that decision of but which one is fair? Skill over consistency, someone who's been around for a while. I didn't have to make that decision. I do not envy any gym owner that has to make it. So just know that, moms, the part that lost me here was replacing loyal athletes. But man, it's a hard call for any owner or coach to have to make. Okay, number 4. This one's going to be pretty easy. The coaching culture matters. Coaching should be structured and positive. There's no need to talk down to athletes or degrade them to get results. Respect breeds respect. The most effective coaches inspire through encouragement and accountability, not fear or embarrassment. Every athlete deserves to feel safe, supported, and motivated in their gym. I agree with this. I don't think that we should have to speak down to athletes. Not that we should have to, but I don't think that we should be speaking down to athletes. I do think that there are various types of parenting. And if you are a gentle parent versus a disciplined parent, you probably can see a firm tone as something that's negative sometimes. And so I think when you say the coaching culture matters, I totally agree with you. But I also think that when you're talking about, speaking down to people or degrading, there's definitely a matter of opinion that's in there. Do I also think that sometimes I kind of make the joke that kid's a little scared of me, that's why they're working so hard right now? Yeah, I don't think it's a true fear. I think it's a fear of discipline, that kids do kind of crave that discipline and they need it. But at the same time, do I think coaches should be making kids truly afraid of them? Absolutely not. That doesn't breed a good culture. Kids want to please the people that they're around. They want to please their parents. They want to please their coaches. And when they respect their coaches, they want to do it even more. They want those coaches to be proud. Okay, number 5, favoritism and fairness. Blatant favoritism based on a personal relationship is discouraging and frustrating. Every family pays the same price to be here. Every athlete deserves equal opportunity to grow, improve, and be seen. When certain athletes are consistently favored, others start to feel invisible no matter how hard they work. That destroys morale and motivation. Families aren't asking for special treatment, just fairness, transparency, and an even playing field for all. So to this anonymous writer, I would also say this contradicts your number 3. Because when you're saying that they should not have favoritism based on personal relationships, but then in number 3, you're talking about how you shouldn't replace loyal athletes because loyalty should be valued and not overlooked. You have to recognize that a long-term athlete is going to have a relationship of a bond and a connection with that coach or with the owner. And families who have been around my gym for 10 years, even if they're not there now, their kids come back from college to visit, they come stop in and say hi. If I see that mom, we're probably going to talk for a couple of minutes because they were at our gym for 10 years. So to say that you both need to value loyalty and not overlook those athletes, but also say that you can't have favoritism based on personal relationships, those two really kind of combat each other, don't they? The other part of this is it's hard to not reward what a coach sees that others don't see. An athlete who is, given a homework card and said, hey, you need to do these exercises at home because right now I'm seeing XYZ and you're tumbling, or you're arching your back every time we do an extension and a stunt as a base. Coaches are the ones that are going to see the difference if that athlete is working. If the flyers are stretching, if the kid is at home working on their jumps, the coaches are the ones that are going to see it. A parent necessarily will not see the difference between a back handspring with sort of bent knees and a back handspring with no bent knees. I want to say that, will you recognize it? Perhaps. But most parents don't see that as progress in their children and definitely wouldn't see it in other children when they're not watching so carefully. So I think it is challenging because what do coaches find out of the athletes they enjoy coaching the most? They find that an athlete is coachable, that an athlete works hard, that they're working hard behind the scenes and in front of their teammates. And I don't think that parents can always see those things. So as we're talking about favoritism, like, are some of my favorite long-term athletes that I've worked with over the years, like the kids that I remember when I think of like, man, that kid was so much fun to coach. They all embodied those traits. They were hardworking. They had a good attitude. They were able to develop, and I'm not saying they had it in the beginning, but they were able to develop a growth mindset. They were respectful. And so those things can often be what creates a perception of favoritism. But really, it's just things that other parents would never see. Number 6, accountability and communication. When parents bring up concerns, please stop gaslighting or dismissing them as, quote, the problem. Most families are rule-following, respectful, and fully supportive of your program. They promote your gym, bring in new athletes, and help generate livable income for your coaches. Not just through team fees, but also through privates, classes, and extra training. These are loyal families who want to see your gym succeed. Shutting them down or labeling them as difficult doesn't solve anything. It just pushes good people out and damages the reputation of your gym. True leadership means listening, showing empathy, and handling feedback with professionalism. A healthy gym culture starts with open, respectful communication, not fear or defensiveness. I actually agree with pretty much all of this. The only thing that kind of caught me off guard was the livable income, because you probably don't know what the expenses are, and to assume that the parents paying tuition are the only way that the gym has livable income. That one was a little bit off base, but I'm not even going to go down there. The word that stuck out to me here was professionalism, and I couldn't agree more. I can give you a couple reasons, though. I've worked with hundreds of gym owners over the years, and I can give you a couple reasons that you may not see this in your gym. I think when you are young, when I was a 26-year-old gym owner, was totally different than being a 41-year-old gym owner. I didn't experience some of those things with my own kids, so I didn't have that same level of empathy that I have at this age. I think being young, a lot of times we feel like we need to prove ourselves, and we have to prove that we can handle this and that we are credible and we know what we're talking about. And sometimes that does develop a bit of an arrogance, but it's also that insecurity. And not every gym owner is like this. I know a 22-year-old gym owner I work with who's incredibly humble and I think demonstrates a lot of professionalism. And so I'm not saying every gym owner is that way. I think a second reason, it's an old industry culture. The bye Felicia mentality is old industry standard. And I am here to tell you that it's part of the reason that our company, Next Generation Gym Owners, started in the first place. We were so tired of going to some of these coaching forums on Facebook and seeing people say, well, the parents are questioning me about this. And all the answers below it were like, kick them out of your gym, say goodbye to them. Like, they're not the right fit for you. We would watch these threads unfold and it was like, wait a minute. One, it doesn't sound like they're questioning you. It sounds like they're asking questions, which are two different things realistically. And then it also, like, these coaches and owners just didn't have solid advice. They didn't have anywhere to turn for rational advice. I think today that's a little bit different. 8 years ago, I don't think there was anywhere that you could really turn and get solid advice from people. Today, there are options out there. And so it's exposing the gym owners and coaches to those better options, or it's getting them to kind of mold out of that old industry standard and into like, okay, your customers aren't questioning you. They just have questions. And those are reasonable questions to have. I also think that burnout can be a big reason. Owners, man, it would be fair to say that the average gym owner is definitely working more than 40 hours a week. A lot of your coaches are working off of the clock. They're answering messages, they're studying rules, they're doing choreography, like off of the clock. And so burnout is super common in this industry. And I think when you get somebody who wants to fire back or they're impatient with feedback, a lot of times it's simply they're frustrated that the communication is off and they're too burned out to sit down and really listen. Is it an excuse? No. To parents, it's not. But know that can be the case. I also think it's because they've been burned by previous parents in the gym. There is not a gym owner out there who's owned for more than a couple years who hasn't been burned by somebody. And when I say burned, maybe that kid left for dance. Maybe that kid left for the gym down the street. Maybe they left because you didn't have a level 4 team and they wanted a level 4. And so they went to a competitor. It's hard for gym owners until they get a little bit longer in the industry and have a little bit more wisdom to not let that burn impact future customers. And I had this happen a couple years ago, and a parent said to me, right now it feels bad because those kids left for a competitor. But don't forget, you've got hundreds of other kids that stayed. I think having that perspective is really valuable, but know that lack of professionalism is sometimes an owner who is too afraid to get burned again. Lastly, I come back to the fact that, I think that parents can do a better job with their level of communication. I think parents can come into a conversation at a 10 when maybe they could come in at a 5. The mama bear feeling because your kid got pulled from a certain section, it feels like the biggest thing you're going to experience, and your child's going to have devastating long-term mental health issues over it. But a year from now, you probably are going to look back at that situation and say, okay, that isn't quite how that unfolded. So it can go both ways. Owners come in at a 10, coaches come in at a 10, parents come in at a 10. And I think a lot of times we just need to take a breath and put that into perspective and come in closer to like a 5. Even if you're super passionate about something, come in at a 5. So here's how this crazy mom answered or ended her post. She said, right now, too many families are financially and emotionally drained. Too many athletes are questioning if they want to keep going. This isn't what cheer was meant to be. We're asking gym owners everywhere to take a step back and remember why this sport exists. Let's bring back the love of cheer. Let's create an environment where athletes feel valued, respected, and inspired. With respect and hope for change, concern cheer families and athletes. So I am going to end with a kind of final thought here. I think it's important for us to remember that there are lots of different types of programs out there. And what my program is different than the giant World's Gym up in Kansas City. They're just different. They operate differently. I want them to operate differently. I have some limitations that require them to operate differently. Being in a town of 20,000 people, you guys have to recognize that 63% of Americans live in rural or small suburban communities. So it's going to be different in a small town gym, which is the majority of gyms in America, than a huge mega gym. What you might find, and this is not a D1, D2, because there's actually some really great D1 gyms that are in suburban, small suburban, and even rural communities. But what you might find in those smaller town gyms is that maybe athletes feel like they do have to go somewhere else to level up. Maybe they feel like if they want to win every time or be on a world's team, they do have to leave. But here's what they sacrifice by doing that. The coaches know them. They know their names. They know their family members. They know when it's your annual vacation to Disney World. They know that athlete so well. I have a friend whose daughter does volleyball. They had to decide this year, was she interested in staying with kind of the local league that's about 30 minutes away? Or was she going to go up to a big league in Kansas City that's significantly more expensive and farther away, but also a bit more competitive? And I talked to her mom and I'm like, so why would you, what was the benefit of the two different ones? And clearly the benefit of the smaller one is more of her friends are on that team. It's closer. She can still do high school sports. She can still have a job. There are a bunch of benefits to that one. Whereas the one that's up in Kansas City, that was I was kind of shocked, you guys. You think cheer is expensive. 5 times more for the one up in Kansas City, but it has more potential for college recruiters and they practice a whole lot more and perhaps they have more wins. So there was a huge benefit still to the smaller program based on what she was looking for out of this season. And I think we have to remember that gyms are going to operate differently, just like these two volleyball programs operated differently. And you have to find what's the best fit for you. Are you okay with going to the gym that might replace your child pretty easily because they've got alternates just sitting on the bench waiting to hop in at any point, but they might go to Worlds? Or do you prefer to make sure that your kid is fully engaged and involved in all parts of the routine? And the coaches are probably going to work a lot harder with you for your kid to get the skills so that they can stay in that section because there are no alternates. So I think that's the balance that each parent has to find for themselves. So to this crazy cheer mom, thank you for this post. I think it was actually good for owners to hear. It was good for parents. And with that, you guys, thank you for hopping on this episode of the Full Out Cheer podcast. I will see you on the next one.